so we put Kelly to work. I'm trying to figure out why there's still some of the old rails laying here. A little bit of history left behind. All right, so here's a good way to do an intro. There she is, my ride or die, my honey, my love. Not just my partner today, because everybody else bailed on me. and I can't judge, probably for good reason.
I'm the only crazy one.
She's the only one crazy enough to do this with me. It's funny how love compromises your judgment. Yeah. But we are at North Fork, my love and I. And we hiked in at least 2 miles, maybe 2.5. I'll have to do my homework again. And 4.5 mile drive from Briceburg, where we left the highway. So we are 6.5, maybe 7 miles downstream. Had to think about that a minute. All right, so we're gonna follow Kelly's lead.
Oh Lord, don't do that.
We gotta get off this trail.
Don't follow my lead.
Across the river. It's fraught with perilous rocks. Yeah, and this poor little fella didn't make it. Oh man. Yeah, I can go in front. Well, we'll pretend like I know what I'm doing, huh?
You do. You know more about what to do than I do.
This is pretty though. Look at all this rock's been polished. Ooh, hummingbird. Yeah, that is pretty cool. You want to take a guess at the date on this one, babe? Almost. September 6th, 1940. All right, so we made it to North Fork. Kelly and I have been looking at these all day long. And these date anywhere from 1936 to 1940. Which is interesting because the rower was abandoned in 1945. And so just for reference, I showed you that video clip earlier. Briceburg, 6 miles downstream. I'm sorry, Briceburg, I said Briceburg, Bagby, 6 miles downstream. And so now we're gonna continue. So basically we hiked in, we're 6.5, 7 miles in, like I mentioned. We're now gonna hike out and take you upstream. By the way, look at that. And those are just a few, and I mean very few, of the ruins of the North Fork Bridge. And I forgot to mention, see, I'm getting rusty. I forgot to mention this part. Welcome to installment, you remember what number it is?
8.
8, you got it. Installment 8.
Let's go.
That's why I asked her, because I wasn't even sure anymore. And this is all that remains. Not a stick of lumber.
Yes, that is a hoof.
That is a hoof?
Get over. That is a hoof.
Oh yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Look at that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, look, bear space.
Wow, look at that.
Look at this. Not far from the bear poop.
Not far from the bear poop.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be bear scat?
Yeah.
Maybe there's a correlation between the two.
Maybe so. That's why let's do what we're gonna do and get up out of here.
All right, there you heard it. We're gonna do what we gotta do and get on up out of here. I agree. Plus, it's starting to get hot.
That's the second pile of bear scant that I saw, not the first.
You know, when you first said that, I thought you said bare skin.
Oh.
It's like, what? All right, so there's the North Fork where we crossed, but I want to show you this. This is the span. Right behind us here, there's a big concrete footing. And then there was one single span, I want to say it was 150 feet long, which apparently anchored right to that big footing right there, and then continued up to the right-of-way up top. By the way, if you look at the rocks that are stacked there, there's actually a name for that, I can't remember what it's called, but those rocks are stacked basically in a crisscross pattern, and you see them all along the right-of-way here. It's interesting, they're still here while so much has been washed away. Now the interesting thing about the North Fork Bridge was because when the tracks cross the bridge here, it's about on a 10-degree bend. So they had to put all the infrastructure, all the supports underneath, which made the bridge obviously susceptible to flooding. And as you can see, they do get some pretty heavy-duty runoff here. But as far as I know, this bridge was never washed out, even during the 1937 flood. So as peaceful as this is, and it is definitely very peaceful, there's a really nice breeze. It's time to get up on out of here, as my honey would say. And I said I wanted to do this before summer. It is one day before summer. Tomorrow is summer. Nothing like procrastinating. But we're here. It's 89 degrees, we got a little bit of a breeze. I'm gonna try and get out of here before it gets any warmer. So I'm more worried about the heat and the human activity that we might run into, which has been very little. My honey here, she's more worried about the wildlife. Yeah, she found bear poop.
Bones too?
And a hoof of an animal.
And a bone.
Yeah. So she may have a valid concern. We'll leave now so we don't have to find out. So one thing I forgot in our haste to get away from the bears, the wildlife.
The bears.
I say including human wildlife, is when I was walking up on the western portion of the bridge here. I keep calling it North Fork. That is what it was called for a moment, but the real name that Yosemite Valley attached to this area was Lehmer, and Lehmer was the first president. I forgot the man's first name, but last name is Lehmer. He was the first president of the Yosemite Valley Railroad. And I didn't find the water tank. There was a 5,000-gallon water tank over there at one time. They removed it in 1928. And there was a spur that they actually called Lehmer Spur. There's no trace of it. That's long been overgrown. So with that said, we're gonna get on out of here.
The bears get us.
Before the bears get us. We're gonna make our escape. Well, not exactly the route we took coming in, but we're gonna figure it out. You got it?
Yep.
There it is, August 26th, 1940. And interesting because that's only 5 years before they abandoned the railroad. And it is pretty down in here. And it's late June, pretty dry and dusty already. I can only imagine how pretty it is down here. Actually, I do know how pretty it is down here in the spring. We've actually mountain biked this a few times many, many years ago. And it is beautiful in the spring. Would have been a nice train ride. Alright, we are at a place, actually we're on the west end of what they called the Merced Rapids. And maybe about a half a mile east of us, which is where we're headed now, we'll come to the remains of the ruins of the old hydroelectric plant. Alright, Kelly just noticed something here. So there's that retaining wall we were looking at. So we're going to come straight across the Merced River Canyon and up this rock face, and check this out. Boom. What is that? Is that a communication line or power line from the generating plant? Although we're kind of on the wrong end. We're downstream of the plant and Mount Kings north, so who knows? Kind of a cool find though. Right, check this out, we have another rock retaining wall, and that obviously was, if not a pathway, maybe it was actually wide enough for a vehicle. And that does go upstream towards Mount King Mine, which is significant because right below us is the ruins of the hydroelectric plant, which generated electricity. So this power plant here was put into service in 1914. Prior to that, the Mount King Mine, which we'll be visiting here in a little bit, we're actually headed that way now. It's about 1.5 miles upstream. It began operation 1899, and it went all the way to 1914 using the trams that were up on the mine shaft, which is about 300 feet above the railroad and about 1/4 mile away from the railroad. Those were powered by mule. Prior to 1914, there were about 10 stamp mills in operation. By 1914, there were 40, so they needed a lot more motive power, so the mules weren't going to do it anymore. And this operated from 1914 all the way until about 1922 when the Mount King Mine shut down. And from what I've read, it sounds like this, along with a whole lot of other structures down at the Mountain King site, were washed away in the 1937 floods. Because other than that, right there in front of us, and the retaining wall across the canyon, there's nothing here to indicate this place ever even existed. Another little piece of history here. Check that out. Right above us on the railroad right-of-way. This looks similar to some of the communication lines that the YV had, so this is probably YV and not the power plant. Alright, and here we go with another attempt at here we go with another attempt at reverse engineering. Look at all this polished rock here, that's amazing. But check it out, right at the top of this thing, right in the middle of your screen. Big old hole right there. I'm wondering if that's where, if they dammed the water up, the water went down through there, exited beneath it, and then down in here was the turbines or whatever they use to generate electricity. Sounds good on paper. Look at that. That is pretty doggone cool. Most of the canyon looks pretty much like this where you're hiking. Obviously the YV right-of-way is right in front of us here. You got a lot of washouts like you see there, but for the most part, this is what you're hiking. So it's a pretty easy hike, especially if it was a little bit cooler. It's like another retaining wall here just above our power plant. All right, this is looking a little friendlier than a moment ago. Kelly and I didn't do our due diligence and brush up on exactly what poison oak looks like, but these guys are infringing upon the trail in many spots. We're just pretending they're plants with bad intentions. All right, so we're coming to another structure here I want to show you when we get to it. Again, we're still continuing our way upstream, but look across the canyon here. This old structure here, and I was looking at it wondering what it is, but now it kind of all makes sense. And it'll make more sense when we get down the canyon and I show you that other structure, or the ruins of the other structure I was talking about. But this is an old flume, or the ruins of it. In fact, right here, right there, you can see there's it's like some old, remains of some old tubing. And so this flume comes from that structure upstream, which we'll show you in a minute, ran down the canyon wall. And remember that retaining wall we're looking at? This flume carried water all the way down to the hydroelectric plant. All right, it's all coming together now. And while we're looking at old structures, check that out. The remains of an either old power pole for the hydroelectric plant or communication pole for Yosemite Valley Railroad. All right, so we stopped for a moment here on the way back towards Briceburg. And I noticed this on the way down, but I'd not read about this in any books, but this has to be the dam structure, or at least the retaining wall. I guess the other part of the dam would have gone across the river here. But if you look at it, so this would have been the dam where the water was retained behind that, or upstream of that. And if you look right here, this looks like probably a footing, perhaps, of where the wooden bents would have been stacked or constructed on top of this. And above those, the flume, which would have carried the water downstream to that flume we were looking at earlier. And again, I was thinking that the dam was built right there at the generator plant, but apparently not. So again, the water would have been dammed up behind this structure right here in front of us, which at that time would have gone all the way across the river and then flowed through the flume on the opposite side of the canyon all the way down to the hydroelectric plant, which it's at least a half-mile downstream from here. So quite a piece of engineering, especially given the time, 1914. Pretty amazing. All right, so there's our footing for the flume. Here is the dam with an outlet for whatever reason right there. But if we needed confirmation that this was indeed a dam, look at this. Here it is right here. This, I guess, would have been a spillway structure behind it, but so it would have spanned the river right here. That is pretty cool. Again, that's a nice piece of engineering for 1914. That is impressive. And as it's pushing, has to be pushing 95 degrees in the canyon right now. I don't know if there was an operator at this place during the day, but man, I would have wanted that job. Did a little bit of swimming during my shift. All right, I remember seeing this on the way in. I'm hoping that means we're almost back to the trailhead because it is hot down in here. And wouldn't you know, we're out of water. Oh boy. July 22nd, 1940. A lot of these were reported in 1940, a few in 1936. Okay, we've made it to Mountain King Mine. This area was developed first in 1899. Had about 5 stamp mills at that time. And you can see going up the side of the mountain there's that tram that goes all the way to the top. From what I read, the mine shaft is about 300 feet in elevation directly above us, but about a quarter mile up this mountain. And so they would take all that ore, processed ore, or I should say raw ore, bring it down the tram, which you can see the roadbed for, right to this stamp mill, where it would be processed and then put right onto the YV rail cars and then transported downriver west of us towards Merced. Now in 1914, or I should say by 1914, the operation had expanded. So there are now about 40 stamp mills operating, and this is the footing here, this concrete footing for the new stamp mill. You can see the rock wall there. And what that looks to be is, I'll try not wobble too much here guys, but that was a roadway that went up to the stamp mill. So I believe that probably intersects up at the top. I'm guessing that is the tram to the top of the new stamp mill. And I'll show you some photos of this thing. This thing was quite a structure here, quite tall, and definitely where the platform was at a much higher elevation on the mountain than the original stamp mill over here. Here's and again, obviously this is the YV roadbed going through the community. And at the time, or I should say at the height of operation, there was of course the stamp mill here, the mine, a schoolhouse, a tavern, and a bunkhouse. And those would have all been scattered around the mountainside here. In fact, where this home is now, in fact, this is still a functioning residence. This would have been, and I don't know if this is the original home or not, we'll have to look a little closer. I don't think it is. We'll have to look a little closer at some of the old photos, but this would have been where the mine manager would have resided. So I'll throw that, I have a still photo from Jack's book, I'll make sure I throw that in the video. But this is quite a thriving community back then. And as Jack put in his book, there was so much activity up the hill on this side of the railroad, and a whole lot of other activity going on down here by the riverside. That when the YV built the rails through here in 1907, they had to kind of squeeze their operation in amongst all this other activity. So again, Mountain King first started operations in 1899. It peaked all through the teens, 1915 through 1920. And by 1922, the operating costs exceeded the revenue they could actually generate off the mine, so it was promptly shut down. And everything pretty much remained as it was, because again, the YV was still in operation. But then the floods in 1937 washed out everything right in this area here to the left of the, between the railroad bed and the river. Pretty much everything here was washed out in 1937. And apparently a few residents remained here in the area for quite a few years, but with the railroad closing down in 1945, it's pretty much became abandoned after that. Today, just some old prospectors still out dredging in the river. But I notice even those are few and far between compared to what those were, say, 25 years ago. All right, let's move on. Ice cube before you, huh? And so after leaving Highway 140 at Briceburg and driving about 4.5 miles down this gravel road, which may be obvious when you look at it, this is the old YV road grade. So 4.5 miles in, you come here, and this, right around that bend, is where there's a gate, and that's as far as you can go, at least by car. You can hike another, well, actually from there to Bagby downstream is about another 8.5 miles. So very, very interesting hike. But this is what the Bureau of Land Management, or BLM, this is what they call Railroad Flat. And I'm supposing the reason they call it that is this was once an area that the YV called Harte. And it was here that they had about a 1,500-foot siding where trains could pass one another. And curiously, up until about 1926, there was a saloon built in here somewhere called Matlock Saloon. And Matlock's operated from, actually during the construction of the YV, so that would have been from what, 1905 up until about 1907. And it's reported that once the construction was completed, Matlock's was dismantled and no longer in business. All right, we're gonna get out of here. It's just getting warmer and warmer, so we're rehydrating and moving on down the road to Briceburg. (1869 to 1910). And this one only 7 years, 5 months. Just a few yards from the YV roadbed. Would have been a pretty railroad trip, huh? At least the right time of year. And this is what they called it, Burma grade. This was built in 1933. I'll show you a photo we have of where this came down right on top of the YV. In fact, about where we're sitting, there was actually a house. This went all the way to Coulterville, Bower Cave, and eventually all the way to Highway 120 up near Yosemite. Yeah, they're definitely down this one. And this is the Briceburg Bridge. There used to be a footbridge across the river here, and they built that footbridge for the people that lived over here. They could walk across the bridge and help build. There was a camp, construction camp, on the other side of the river. Oh, I got somebody coming. And then so in 1926, they built this bridge so they could move material from the Yosemite Valley Railroad across the bridge to construct the highway. Man, people are motoring through here. Yeah. And so, yeah, we're right on the railroad right now where we are. Then this is where, I'll show you that photo where it goes around the bend right here, and that's the grade. Make sure I'm driving more than playing with the camera, huh?
Yeah.
That would be all bad.
All bad. Going across this creepy bridge.
Yeah, but it's a cool bridge. It's only 100 years old, so what could possibly go wrong, huh? This is where they put the canoes in, by the way.
Okay.
Or rafts, or whatever they do. Now it's your window, honey. That's good. You're good. We're fine. Camera's getting heavy. I'm going to put it down anyway.
There comes a car.
They're going to have to wait. We have the right of way. Okay, so we just came from across the river where the little community of Briceburg is still today. It's a lot smaller now than it was back in the days of the YV. Now the history of Briceburg begins with William Brice, who resided up the hill here at a little community called Mid Pines, which is about halfway between where we're at now and Mariposa. So as the mines played out in Mid Pines, Mr. Brice decided to dismantle his operation, move it down here and locate it on the opposite side of the river where we're at now in the little community of Briceburg. The YV had a pretty long siding there, and Brice did a pretty brisk business serving the miners and the lumbermen and even the YV employees. In 1924, the all-weather highway was constructed, which, by the way, that's that bridge right in front of us, which that actually was finished in 1926. So between 24 and 26, Brice relocated his store from across the river adjacent to this building we're going to discuss in a moment. Located it right there, right in the center of your frame, adjacent to this building. This was built in 26 as it was a tavern, a gas station, and a restaurant. And this served the travelers on the all-weather highway and some of the locals as well. And this is a weekday, and unfortunately this building is only open Saturdays and Sundays, so we're not going to be able to go inside. But it is cool that they've taken an old historic building and turned it into a visitor center. I wanted to take you inside and show you what's going on, but we'll not be able to do that today. But we can kind of see what this is all about. This obviously is where the pumps would have been. The island would have been right here between these two pillars. You would have drove in here and got your gas, done your dining, had a drink. An interesting place. And if I remember my dates correctly, the Bureau of Land Management took this over in 1980 after it had been shut down for quite a few years. Did a full restoration on it, turned it into a visitor center. It is busy through here, and this is a weekday. So in about 1926, the all-weather highway was designated Highway 140, California Highway 140. And about 20 years later, or about 1945, the YV would no longer be in operation. And what you're looking at right there in the center of the frame would have been a span, a bridge span, right across that creek there. You can still see the old right-of-way. And then just above it, there's you can see the cut in the mountain there. That's Burma grade. A long, twisting, dusty road. Look at that all the way. Look at near the top of the mountain. You see the cut again. I've done that. That's a long road. Today it's the Merced River Recreation Area. An interesting area, popular area. All right, so that's going to do it for installment 8 from our beginnings, our 3-mile hike down to North Fork, or Lehmer, as the YV would call it, all the way here to Briceburg. A distance of, well, and what we now know, a distance of about 7.5 miles. 3 of that on foot, the other 4.5 along the old YV roadbed. Installment 9, we're going to wrap things up. We're going to head up further into the canyon and head towards El Portal. And as I've said before, hopefully that'll take place sooner rather than later. It's getting warm out here. I wanted to get this done before summer, and it is literally June 20th. So I accomplished my goal of finishing it before summer. There's less than 24 hours to go before summer's here, but we did it. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you in installment 9.